It was absolutely brilliant. I've got to say, it was very lively. It was full blast. And it would go like a homesick angel.
Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast. The museum is located near Manchester in the UK, and you can find more details at avroheritagemuseum.co.uk. This episode is with Richard Jones, a former VC10 pilot who recalls his path into the Royal Air Force in the 1960s via a pleasure flight company at Manchester's Ringway Airport. Richard shares the story of his RAF career via the de Havilland Chipmunk, BAC Jet Provost, and onto transport aircraft such as the Vickers Valetta, Blackburn Beverley, de Havilland Comet, and onto the Vickers VC10, his favourite aircraft. Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to make sure that you don't miss out on future episodes. I'm delighted to welcome Richard Jones.
I'm trustee at the museum. I have a particular sort of role towards human resources, HR issues, some health and safety issues as well, because that was a little bit my background before I came here.
What I wanted to get onto was your RAF career.
Oh, my goodness. Right.
So the first question I had is why did you join the RAF? How did that happen?
Oh, I've always been interested in airplanes. Simple as that. From being a very small child, always found me. I was born in 1943, so the war was on. And I remember as a sort of 2-year-old, I think, in my mother's arms, watching airplanes flying over our house. And I lived out at Bowden, just the other side of Altrincham then. And I've always grown up with an interest in aeroplanes and engineering in general. So it just seemed natural. And I started really with the flying thing. I started back in, about 1958, I think it'd be, with a pleasure flying company at the airport called Airviews Limited, run by a real character by the name of Bruce Martin. He hobbled around on 1.5 legs, but he flew this aeroplane, carrying passengers around. You'd never get away with it today. And he had this old Oster, and a group of us, lads, used to help him get it out of the hangar on a Sunday morning, prime the engine, check the oil, and check the tyres, because his landings were more of what you might term arrivals. You arrived. It usually involved a few bounces and a few bumps, so you used to get through tyres. So we used to sort of, what we used to do was change wheels, change spark plugs. You never get away with it now. Unlicensed kids, basically, doing all this. And we did it when we did it okay, I have to say. And one occasion, he did the usual type arrival on the main runway, and the aircraft was stuck. He burst a tyre. The aircraft was stuck on the runway. Just amused air traffic, no end.
I bet.
On a Sunday, I mean, the aircraft were only fairly slow then. They weren't the jets at that time, apart from stuff from here. Vulcans used to use it quite often. Anyway, so we hopped on a scooter, which one of our colleagues had, spare wheel on the back, holding it on like grim death, holding the spare wheel, shot across, imagine it nowadays, shot across the field to the side of runway 24. And yours truly, being the taller, had my back under the strut, holding the wing on, and I had to try and stand up a bit, and the other guy be there with changing the wheel, and then stand back, swing the prop again, with no electric starter, swing the prop, and he would taxi in, and we would come in on the scooter.
Wow.
And then phone up air traffic and say we're clear now. Yeah.
Had he lost his legs during the war?
Yeah, it was an accident during the war. He'd lost half of one leg, concerning a mosquito and an Alp, so I believe. He was a great guy, he really was. Yeah. He introduced me to the delights of the ship in, amongst others. I've been teetotal until then, but, oh yes.
Led you astray.
Led me astray, and it's been a long, long story, really, and it's still continuing as far as I know.
And at what age were you when you signed up to the RAF?
Well, it was a bit of a long, fiddly story. That I applied about 17 when I first applied, and got knocked back because I had a complaint with my nose at the time. polyps in the nose. So I went into industry, and I was really sort of dischuffed, and I had a rather stormy meeting with the recruitment officer at Cosford, RAF Cosford, and so thought, blow it. So I went into industry, which was a mistake really, but hot-headed. I was very hot-headed then. So anyway, I went through that apprenticeship, and then I went back, thought I'll reapply. Now I've had these various operations on my nose, and amazingly enough, I passed. So I was about 22, I think. Yes, about 22 when I did that. And so I went down to Halton first of all, and then got posted to various outstations after that. Went through my sort of trade training, and the opportunity came up some years later to transfer to aircrew. So they don't do it now, but then they did. Now you have to have a university education. I didn't have a university education. But anyway, I hadn't let that stop me, to be honest. I'd got qualifications and that at college, had done college courses, etc. So anyway, I put in for flying aircrew duties, and I was lucky enough to be selected. So went on the initial sort of training on the old chipmunks and things. I'd done chipmunks in the ATC, so beforehand. So I was quite happy with the chipmunk, I must say. It was a beautiful aeroplane, I must say. Really nice. It was better upside down than the right way up, but...
and still flying right the way through to the end of the Cold War as well.
It was, yeah. Well, yes, I think the BBMF has still got a couple.
Yeah, I think they have one of the Berlin ones, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it's a historical one, that. Yeah, so they've still got it. Such a superb little machine, really. Very difficult to replace. So went through that, and I went I got onto the JP, Jet Provost, after that. And but I was sort of, well, I was a little bit tall. I was taller than I am now, actually. And it was also inferred, too, that I wouldn't really cut the mustard on single-seaters. And it wasn't really my interest anyway. I wanted the big stuff. So I was streamed via the Valettas and Varsities at the time to multi-engine. I went through the multi-engine route, ended up being posted to Lynham. And
so what types did you fly to then train on those multi-engine types?
No, you did a lot of it. You did a lot of the training on the Valetta, or Vickers Valetta, which is basically a civil military version of the Viking. And did some time on the Varsity, which was interesting. Very prone to engine failures, certainly prone to leaking oil. And then I got a chance to Beverley. I got transferred to the Beverley fleet, which was entertaining. Because there you travel quite a lot as well. You know, because you're still in the old sort of, well, we still had a bit of an empire then. You're sort of flying down the African routes and this very slowly, very ponderously. But apart from losing a lot of oil, very reliably. A reliable old aeroplane, really. So
what locations did you end up on those all around the world?
All round of it, yeah. Yes, you went all over the place. Seletar, Singapore, Akateria, Australia, Garn. So Hong Kong on a few occasions.
So flying to Australia, what aircraft did you fly to
Australia?
No,
the Australia trips weren't in Beverley's. They were in the... I went on to the Britannia fleet and did some time on the Britannia. I was a second officer, such, you know, and a very junior second officer at that. And but that was worthwhile. It was a lovely thing. That was a lovely airplane to fly, and did very little in the way of landing them or taking off on them. The captains of the time were very sort of possessive, shall we say? so I didn't get much experience really on those from the point of view of landing or takeoff. The odd occasion you were acting as a human autopilot flying it.
Which seems a little bit sort of short-sighted in terms of, you know, because you were the support if the captain was incapacitated. You were the guy who was going to land it.
You're going to land it, exactly. Yes. I mean, some were better than others, I have to say.
Yeah.
And it's something I bore in mind a few years later myself when I went to captain. I'd always tried to bear that one in mind, that, you know, give the guys as much experience as you possibly can. And which is what I did. Anyway, coming back to that, then I did a little bit on the Comet, delightful aeroplane, the Comet 4, C Mark 4, that was a beaut, really nice bit of kit. And then I managed to wangle it because I love the look of the aeroplane. And being interested in aircraft and engineering, it wasn't just a sort of bus driver job. I liked what I was doing. So I thought the VC10 looked so wonderfully attractive. I thought, got to go for that. And it seemed to have a lot of power and a lot of personality and everything. So, and of course, the jobs it was doing was quite attractive at the time. You're doing a range of sort of from trooping to VIP to CASEVAC, this is medical evacuation. So I got onto that. Got onto it with 10 Squadron at Bryce. So I went across there. And again, as a junior sort of first officer. And that's where the bulk of my time was spent on the aircraft, on the VC10, through a number of roles. We were doing, as I say, the VIP stuff and the trooping. Yeah. And did one of the things that stands in my mind, we did some of the evacuation, medical evacuation from the Falklands.
Right.
And for Ascension Island, that sort of thing. And then later on, we were able to fly into Stanley when they got the runway sorted. But that was always very worthwhile, obviously. Very worthwhile, that was. And I always found the aeroplane a completely delightful thing to fly. You hardly needed an autopilot. It was so good. I mean, I had a go once in a 707 to a friend of mine, slightly illegally, but I managed to have a go in a 70. And that was sort of yawing about the sky. You had to sort of really, you had yaw dampers on it, but they were only limited success. Aerodynamically, it wasn't a patch on the VC10.
Because the VC10 was designed for relatively short runways as well,
that's right, it was. It was. The VC10 was compromised a little bit when it first came out because it was designed around specific BOAC requirements at the time, which was the Empire routes down through Africa, mainly. And as you say, shorter runways, you needed a lot of power, you needed a bigger wing than you'd otherwise have. So obviously that extra wing area is extra weight, extra drag. So when the plane first came out, it didn't meet the drag requirements at all. And funnily enough, one of the members here, Joyce Mason, her husband was the one who worked on the so-called beaver tail between the two engines on the VC10. You've got this sort of scalloped thing comes out, like a sort of thin area between the two engine exhausts. And he designed that to cut down on the drag losses. And originally it wasn't fitted that, and the drag losses were quite high. And it did actually largely resolve that problem. So it gave it its anticipated drag reduction, which of course helped the range.
And it was quite popular with passengers, I understand, because it was quite quiet. The cabin was quieter than a lot of jets of that period.
Yeah, it was. It was. Unless you were sat right at the back, where it could be quite noisy from the air intakes. But apart from that, it was quiet, comfortable, and very smooth. Because you've got a clean wing, which was extremely aerodynamically very efficient. And it gave you a very smooth ride. But the problem with it was, as I say, it was tied around to a particular airline's requirements. So other airlines didn't necessarily want that. They wanted a trade-off for the sort of short runway capability. Okay, we can use longer runways, but do transatlantic. And so Vickers did actually bring out the stretched Super VC10, which had an extended wing and uprated engines, and the extended fuselage at about 20 feet extension, which served the North Atlantic equally as well. It was really, very, very popular on that run, very popular. For the reasons you mentioned, it was very quiet in the cabin. And then the RAF got interested in about 1960, well, when it first came out, about 1964. They got interested and put an order in 65 for 14 of what they call the C Mark 1. And that was a hybrid aircraft, that's one of them. I was outside. It was a hybrid. Basically, you got the standard fuselage with the the Super's tail, but the Super VC10's tail had a fuel tank in the fin. It had that, and it had the uprated engines of the Super VC10, the slightly bigger wing, but the shorter fuselage. So of course it went like the proverbial. And the only other modification really was it had a cargo door in the side, a big door on the side of the fuselage, on the port side. And I think that was the extent of a reinforced floor, reinforced freight floor. Apart from that, it was pretty much as per the civilian version.
Because the military version, the seating arrangement was backwards, wasn't it?
Correct. Yes. The theory at the time was that seats are safer facing backwards. So you always face, in railway parlance, you always face back to the engine. The idea being that it's supposedly safer. Whether it is or not, I don't think it was ever actually proved. But that was the requirement. Yeah. So they were rearward-facing seats, whether you liked it or not. But most people were only too glad to get on it. So a session over in Singapore or somewhere, they're only too glad to get on it.
I think I read somewhere that the VC10 holds the record for the fastest Atlantic crossing subsonic.
Yes.
Next to 5 hours or something.
Yeah, something like that. It was next to the Concorde. It was the quickest.
What was the fuel consumption like? Was that not great?
Not great.
Right. So that was another sort of commercial issue with other airlines.
Well, yes, with other airlines. Yeah, I mean, it was no worse than the 707 using the same engine as the Rolls-Royce Conway. It was no worse, actually. And it was faster. But by the standards, it was heavier. So therefore, you use more power and takeoff or something. So overall, it was slightly thirstier. Overall,
yeah.
I have to say though, I mean, from my perspective, it was absolutely brilliant. Because particularly the C Mark 1, you've got like a hot rod. It really was a pokey aeroplane. You never use full power. In common with a lot of them, you didn't use full power. You used about 95%. Power at most. You could take off slightly less, depending on obviously on the humidity of the day, the runway you're on, the weight you're carrying. All these issues affect the performance for takeoff. And I've got to say, it was very lively. And you did it light. I did a couple of air shows. I was able to claim a couple of air shows, one of which is on here at Biggin Hill. And that was a hoot, that was, because you used full power. There was no messing around with noise abatement or anything like that. You used full blast. And it would go like a homesick angel. It was superb. But it was a marvellous aeroplane in that sense. And very manoeuvrable. And from the point of view of landings away from base, way down the line sort of thing, it was good. From the point of view crosswind tolerance was very good. Would land it fairly straightforwardly, as long as you didn't drop a wing too far. It wasn't bad at all. It was good. In fact, I always reckon that if you couldn't pull off a decent landing with a VC10, you shouldn't really be in that seat. So it was so good. It was just, just really come to ground effect and just grease it down. It was good. Much nicer than the 707.
And, I mean, obviously being a military aircraft, there's a chance of it being under attack. Was there any defensive measures, or was it just speed, or what would you do?
Speed, maneuverability. You had when you were flying into a war zone. Now, I'm fortunate. I didn't. I had sort of, apart from the Falklands, the nearest I got, and even then it was mostly Ascension. But they did have detectors mounted on the tail, which would give you warning of any incoming hostile threat. But other than that, no. There was no armament fitted or anything like that. In fact, on that one, again, there's the evidence still of armour plating on the cockpit, the sides of the cockpit, because obviously there was an incident, somebody coming into Kandahar in a C-130, and somebody got killed. A small arms fire. You're on approach to land.
Yeah.
So you've got to fly low, and somebody got killed. So they did put some armour plating on.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at it, you wouldn't think it would do any good, looking at what they put there, but the Kevlar panels. But apparently it was effective.
Yeah.
So, but I never had to actually put that to the test.
And with your training with the RAF, did you have any escape and evasion training or anything like that?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, actually, is the one where you go in an old helicopter and you're dunked in the water. And the thing turns upside down and you've got to find your way out, which is quite
That doesn't sound very pleasant.
No, it's not very pleasant, actually, I must admit. It's certainly wouldn't suit you if you've got claustrophobia or something like that. But that's the one that really comes to mind. Did that 2 or 3 times. You had to do that for, it's routine, ongoing line training. Did do that. But didn't do any ejection seats or anything like that. No sort of...
Because obviously the VC10 didn't. You either ditched it and
you
got
went
out,
down with
or
it.
that was it.
Yeah, you went down with it, basically.
Yeah.
Which, with that aeroplane, I mean, we had the odd bird strike, which is unusual. We did have the odd bird strike where you lost an engine. But again, the aeroplane had so much power. It was able to handle that very, very successfully, really. You could take off on 3 from a standing start. You could take off on 3 engines. And that was practice on the simulator more than reality. But it was quite straightforward. On the VC10, you had leading edge slats that worked in conjunction with the flaps on the back of the wing. You got an engine failure, you disconnect you got a little lever you pull out, so you can still bring the flaps up as normal after takeoff, but you leave the slats out. The leading edge slats would give you the greater lift, keep the airflow over the wing at a slightly altered angle of attack with one engine failing. You know, that really was a bit of a non-event, really. It didn't actually... it would bite, I believe it would bite if you... Well, I did practice it in the simulator. If you pull the slats in too early, then you get into this deep stall configuration. And no matter how many engines you got running, you were finished. You were going down like that. So there was sort of stress that. That's how you always leave the slats out until the required speed has been reached. Because if you pull them in too early, and the Trident suffered from the same thing. In fact, there was a crash on the Trident at Staines, some in the 70s, I think it was. Because of that, pulled the slats in too early. I just went into a deep stall, and that's it. Killed everybody on it.
So it sounds like the VC10 is absolutely your favourite aircraft.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
And when you sit in the cockpit of the one here, that must feel like coming home.
Oh, it does. Because I've flown that one.
You've flown that one as well?
Yeah, that particular one, yes.
Oh,
yes. Yes, it's quite spooky in a way.
Yeah.
Spooky in a way. Yes, I do. It's but I mean, I'd left there in 87, just about the time they were starting to convert them to tankers. And it's about the time I left the Air Force. And, you know, it had been all 38 years, something like that. I've forgotten a lot of it, to be honest. Because I didn't go into flying like a lot of people went into the airlines. I didn't. Unlike my colleague here, Tucker, another trustee, he went from flying Vulcans and went into the airlines, BOAC, and BA as it was. I didn't do that. I wanted more family time, to be honest, and time at home with the family. So I just went back into, because I had worked at Ferranti or went into the Air Force, so I went back to Ferranti. They were very good like that, you know. I went back to Ferranti and worked there. Well, they went bankrupt, but I managed to duck and dive.
Nothing to do with you, obviously.
Oh, hopefully not. I keep stum on that one. So, no, I don't think so.
One of the things I wanted to ask you was, during your RAF career, what was the hairiest situation you were involved in?
Oh, goodness. I suppose the time on Britannia. You can't say it was a VC10. That was drama-free pretty well. But I suppose Britannia, when we had an undercarriage fault, and we couldn't get one set of wheels down. Starboard wheels wouldn't lock down. And that was a bit entertaining because, obviously, unlike a jet, you've got propellers. So we had visions of striking the propellers on the runway or something. And we could not get, despite some fairly sharp manoeuvring, we couldn't get to Zachatura in Cyprus as well. We couldn't actually get the wheels down, I should say, on that side. So we flew around over the sea to burn off some fuel. And fortunately, we hadn't got too much to burn off. And then we came in for a sort of two-wheel landing, which was a bit interesting. And the aircraft we landed very, very, really short at the end of the runway touch. And kept the wing up, put the starboard wing up. and just sort of kept it until the speed started to fall away. And then it sort of fell down, then bang, 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 some propellers hit the ground, something, and it started slewing round. Then the undercarriage collapsed on the other side. So, as it slewed round like so, it collapsed the undercarriage on the other side. So, yes, we wrote the aeroplane off, but we got away with it. The aircraft, the tail broke off. But we got away with it.
And how quickly did you manage to get out of the...
Oh, we were out of the aircraft within, well, it was full of troops, actually. I mean, they were out within 90 seconds.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. That was the standard evacuation time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, they were out.
You'd done it by the book and...
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, I. Yes. Oh, we had a few beers on that one.
I bet you did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had a few beers on that.
I bet you did.
But that was the only... Well, I did have a bird strike on a VC10 once, but that was a bit of a non-event. We lost an engine. And so we were able to sort of... Well, actually, we flew. We were on a fairly short detail anyway. So we carried on 3. And with the aforementioned slats still out, of course, as we're on 3 engines rather than in all 4, and pull off a 3-engine landing, which was a complete non-event. There was no particular drama about it, particularly as the weather was good. The weather was good, so we were landing at Ghana that time. And the most entertaining approach, really, was Hong Kong. The old Kai Tak. That was a good one.
With all the high buildings.
That's right, you're flying through the buildings, you know. And on the VC10, it was relatively straightforward to do that. You know, once you'd practiced it on the simulator, it was relatively straightforward. I wouldn't have fancied it in a 747, but no, on the VC10, it was quite good because you had to roll it out just before popping the wheels down on the runway touch.
Right.
So it was a bit, you sort of coming around like that, you know, and then landing it. But it was good. It was good. You have to be careful on the 10. Well, like a lot of aircraft, you have to be careful. You get the wing too low, you'd strike the runway with it.
Yeah, because it's quite a wingspan.
Oh, yeah, it's quite, yeah. And it was accentuated when they modified the aircraft for flight refuelling. Some of the C1s were modified to be 2-point tankers. This one was one. And this was toward the tail end of my time in the RAF. And these 2 Mark 32 pods, as we call them, one under each wing. You had to watch it from the clearance point of view. Because if you dropped the wing too much, it was making an expensive noise. And you wouldn't be popular. So
No.
you'd have a lot of questions to answer. So,
More than just the paintwork.
that's right, yes. It's bad enough you straight the paintwork. So,
Did you ever fly into Berlin, into Gatow?
yes.
What was that like? Because it was obviously a much lower altitude because of the air corridor.
That's right, you're flying on the air corridor, yeah. I never had any particular dramas on that, but I do know of people who had escorts from very unfriendly fighters.
Yeah,
You know,
with red stars on
with
the
red
wings.
stars on, yes. I never worked out where they came from. No, but I can't really say I had any drama myself doing that, but had to be very careful.
Yeah.
Very precise.
And Gatow's was a ex-Luftwaffe
That's right.
base, I think.
Was,
but it was
yeah.
right on the edge.
Yeah.
The almost the perimeter fence was the border with East Germany.
That's right, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, you had to be very careful, very prim and proper, everything you did.
Is there anything else we've missed or any great anecdotes that you've got that we've not covered? I'm sure you must have a set of anecdotes that you roll out at your...
Well, I don't know. I mean, don't forget I haven't done this for years. No, as regards anecdotes, I suppose some of the people that I've met on the flights I did, well, the Queen comes to mind, and the Duke. He was always very hands-on, as you can imagine.
Up on the flight deck?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh. You didn't argue with him. Not that you'd want to, actually. He was a delightful bloke. He really was a delightful fellow. He really was. And, he was very good. He had a touch. He had a feel. He had a touch for it. No question. He was good. And he was good at his sort of what-if question. Now, what if I pull this lever? What would it do now, you know? Well, sir, if you don't mind, I'd rather you didn't touch that one. So, but things like that. But no, he's very knowledgeable and he was very good, a bit forceful. But then that was okay. I was happy with that.
Were you introduced to the Queen as well?
Yeah, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, yes, I had to go back into the cabin.
Yeah.
And you introduced, yes, ma'am, you know, yes. But that was all really, it wasn't really in-depth conversation. I had a more in-depth conversations with certain politicians on some of the flights. Maggie Thatcher, she was quite interesting.
And what did you talk about with her?
Oh, Falkland.
Yeah.
Really, 'cause it was just after all that.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
so she was on the crest of...
Oh, she was on the crest, she was. It was about 83. About late 83 it was. And, I had her, and she was very interesting, coming back from Washington, DC. And she was very interesting, very interesting. Enjoyed talking to her. And what else do we have? Oh, we had a Prime Minister whose name I like to forget. He was elected in 1997. Anyway, I won't go there. But I had him. Yeah. Had him as well, yeah. Who, actually, I have to say, despite all my thoughts, he was very pleasant.
Yeah.
I had no argument with him at all. He was very pleasant. Man to man. Very polite, very easygoing. So, I've had a few people like that. I don't think I'm not very good at anecdotes, I have to say. Not very good.
You're doing pretty well at the moment. I've picked up some great ones here. With, landings minus, a bit of undercarriage.
Oh, yes. Undercarriage was always a bit entertaining. That was, wasn't it? Yes.
Well, Richard, it's been an absolute joy talking to you.
Thank you.
And hearing your stories. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you follow us in your podcast app so that you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks very much for listening.